We started the brand with 3,000 euros. We took what we made from that collection, we put it into the next collection, we made some money from that collection, and then just step by step, day by day. I think there's a lot of people who are like, yo, this is not making sense for the business.
Heliot Emil is a luxury fashion brand in industrial elegance from Copenhagen, started by brothers Victor and Julius Juul in their family basement.
These people that can literally get anything they want. I want that, but done like this, but in a different color with these things. That they want to wear our clothes is like extremely humbling.
What do you think it is about the brand that catches the attention of some of the biggest names when it's a very competitive space?
With no outside money and just a few years in, they've held runway shows in the official Fashion Week schedule and has been praised for their innovative designs.
It's important that it becomes more than what they are saying is cool. We don't want to say that other people should buy it because you think it's cool.
Julius, who is creative director, was first headhunted to an agency in New York and then teamed up with his brother to start the brand and make their first fashion show digitally.
That was like a bit like wow, this could actually be something, you know? And we were like blown away by the response. We did a pre-order on the site and it ended up covering all of the expenses that we had for that show.
Going from a few $1,000s to getting a fashion business afloat without financing and building a brand to the global scene by staying real to what you believe in.
Fresh out of a fashion show here in Paris, how do you feel?
Pretty much. I could do with a bit more sleep, but other than that, I feel great. Yeah, really, I mean, everything went super, super smooth, so I'm very, very happy. Yeah.
How many hours have you slept the last week?
I use like this app called Sleep Cycle, and it's not giving me the greatest feedback on the past week. I think like combined, last 5 days is maybe like 20 hours or something. Yeah, so not great. No.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I mean, that makes me even more thankful for coming out here. We're in Paris, so I'm really excited about this. And during Fashion Week, and a big week for you and your brother, I guess.
Yeah, we're right in the middle of everything right now. Yeah.
How many times do you go to Paris, and is all of that business related, or?
Yeah, I mean, everything is business related in one sense or another. We're here for every Fashion Week, and that happens like 4 times a week. And then other than that, we're here to like scout new locations or like check up on showrooms or meet with clients and that kind of stuff. So it's I should be like halfway through fluent in French by now, but I'm definitely not.
Not yet?
I'm like, no, I'm like, une bouillie vin blanc, s'il vous plaît. That's like, that's as far as we go right now. But yeah, we're here quite a lot.
So you and your brother, you started the company together, Heliot Emil.
Yes, that's right.
Was that in 2017?
Yeah, so that was the first collection. So you're kind of like one step ahead in the fashion calendar, kind of. So actually, it was like late 2016 when it came out, but the collection was spring summer 17.
I want to actually start off with going a little bit earlier in than that, because, well, first of all, I met you and your brother, Victor, here in Paris, actually. Last year, we were introduced during Fashion Week, actually, in the fall. And what struck me almost immediately was that, like, you guys were doing something really unique. So I was like, these guys are really up to something. So that was something that struck me almost immediately. And you guys are from Denmark?
That's right. Copenhagen, Denmark.
Copenhagen, Denmark.
Yep.
Okay. Is that also where you grew up, in the Copenhagen area?
Yeah, pretty much. Like center of Copenhagen. We grew up in a place called Frederiksberg. So nice little neighborhood. Yeah. So born and raised in the city.
And in the early days in Denmark, were you like influenced by design or, you know, anything that remotely reminds you of a week like this in Paris?
Of design, I don't know, but I was like a skateboarder kind of kid. So within that world, I guess you can say that there's like some kind of like fascination of the clothing aspect of things as well. So you were kind of like fascinated by what the big stars they were wearing, and you were trying to kind of like, I guess, replicate that a little bit, or like look at what's cool now, and like how can you combine things, and what can you like put together to make a cool outfit. Yeah.
The big skateboarder profiles? Oh, right. Okay.
Yeah.
So who were they? They're like the Tony Hawks of the world?
I was Bear Majera. No, I was very much into like a brand called America, and they had a crew where it was like, just a bunch of really cool kids. I was really into Andrew Reynolds was one of the guys, and Kevin Spanky Long, who was like this, I don't know, at that time he was like 17, 18-year-old kid, and he was like kind of like, I guess, goth-ish punk kind of like cool kid. So I really like liked that whole vibe. They also had like a crew called Baker, and so I always had like Baker skateboards and stuff, and I was always doing frontside flips because that was like Andrew Reynolds' like signature kind of like flip. And it's like,
what is this frontside flip like? I never skateboarded, but I was always really impressed by people who could have that coordination in their body.
Yeah.
I tried doing an ollie, but and I stopped before it got too dangerous.
Well, it's all about like muscle memory pretty much, like you just got like practice and practice and practicing, and then it gets so easy that, like it never goes out of your body almost. So frontside flip is like a kick flip and a 180 in one.
I think I understand. I'm pretending I understand. But I think, I was actually in Colombia a few weeks ago.
Okay.
And I walked past this half pipe kind of where people were skateboarding. And I just remembered how hard it was to do this ollie. And then I'm seeing people doing like crazy tricks.
Yeah.
No protection at all. They're just going back and forth. And like skateboarding is like, it's so hard. I don't think people understand how hard it is before they try.
No, it's kind of weird that, like you have this idea of like a skater kind of like kid being this slouchy kind of like lazy dude. And then you realize how complicated skateboarding actually is in terms of like all the ways you got to like move your body and everything. And you see this, let's say like, a climber as like the like the exact opposite, right, of this, but actually their like coordination and body, like the way that they can move their bodies is like somewhat similar, but I guess it's just like a stereotypical kind of like way of seeing the sport.
So were you like thinking of doing something with the skateboarding, or is that like something you were killing time with?
Back then, I mean, it was more just like, you're 13, 14, 15, it's like you don't really think about like what your life is going to pan out to be. But actually I was like really fascinated with filming as well. So I was like the one that was recording, kind of like we made these, like small little homemade movies with the crew. So
like
that kind of
skateboarding?
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, wow.
So that got me into like video editing and like, fascination with like creating something, like making, let's say, like the graphic design also aspect of like things. And there was like competitions where you could design a board and you could win something. So like always like try to do something like that. So I guess it kind of like paved the way also for the fascination of like creating things.
Yeah. And what did you do with the videos when you were skateboarding and then you edited them? Like, what did you do with the final product? Was that already when social media was a thing and you could like upload it, or?
No, it definitely wasn't. I mean, this was like right when YouTube kind of like came out. Yeah. So very, very early.
So it's like 2006, 2005 maybe.
Yeah. I mean, I guess maybe like 7, 8, something like that. 6, 7, 8. And yeah, I think it was just about like posting it there and then sharing it. There was these like forums, with like local skate crews and stuff. I guess, I don't know if they have that in other countries as well, but there was one in Denmark called Manual, and they, like there would be like these threads of like new crews that were doing videos and stuff, and you would share it in there, and you would be like hoping that people would be like seeing your things and stuff, and then you would make these like it was like a thing to make these sponsor me videos. So you would make like a collection of clips, and you would have like in the start you would have your whatever, and in the end you would have your hammer, which was like your like your biggest trick. So that was like a thing.
What cameras did you use into those years, like 2007, 8? Did you have your like phone?
No,
No, it was not.
no, that was before iPhone. Yeah.
It was before iPhone, right? Yeah.
Yeah. So I had a VX1000, I think it was called. Sony.
But it's a digital one.
It's like a tape, like a
Okay, really?
tape on tape DV, mini DV. Yeah. So you would have to like get that with like wires into the computer in order to like play it over, and it would have to play like in real time to record it onto the computer and everything. I'm sounding really old.
I think I'm older than you. But it's yeah, but I mean, it reminds you of how much that has happened in some spaces.
Oh, absolutely. It's insane. Like I was speaking to one of my friends who's like a videographer, and I was asking him also because back when I started like doing video and like all of these things, it was like I could impress the client just by having a camera, you know? And this was like right when the DSLR was like, you know, like on the rise, right? And then now literally people have an iPhone with like a cinema kind of like output, right? So you can't really impress your client just by saying like, oh, this is depth of field, you know? It's like
now it's almost the other way around, I guess.
No.
Like before I learned anything about video, I was like, why do I need to buy a DSLR for like, you know, $5,000 with a lens when I have an iPhone that I got last year, you know?
Exactly.
Until you see it, that's when you recognize like why they still are around.
Oh, most definitely. I mean, but I think, you know, like beyond that, I think there's also just now a bit more focus on like what you can actually create with it, more than just like let's say the quality of the footage or something like that, which I think is, you know, like it's fascinating.
Was that like a bit of why you went into like media and journalism when you started studying after?
I guess that's kind of like where it came from. I've never really thought about that, but I think
it's a very leading question from me.
Yeah,
I don't know why I asked that.
Yeah,
Maybe it doesn't have anything to do with it.
No, I mean, I think it's somewhat true that, you know, like from putting out something and expecting a response from people, you know, like you get fascinated by like creating and like creating things that people can see with your ideas and stuff. And this was also, you know, like I was doing website design and like graphic design and like things like that. So I think that was like where the fascination started. And then I think the in the beginning, the kind of like perfect output for this was advertising, because then you could sort of like put all your powers into one and tell stories for people. And that's at that time really what I wanted to do. And
did you like do it through your own agency, or did you work during studying, or how did you apply that?
I had my own little studio kind of thing. And then I also worked at an agency as like a junior art director. So something to pay the bills and something to like get a bit of creative output through.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Because then you moved to the US right after you were studying, was that?
Yeah, it was actually while I was studying.
While you were studying?
Yeah, so I got a job offer, like out of nowhere kind of thing. And
you got a job offer
for being an art director at
okay.
A big agency in New York. And
how do you do that when you're studying in Denmark?
So I sent an application for an internship, and the application was quite extra. It was like a website where I had made a video of myself like performing a thing, and like I was like doing a lot, and then I sent an actual like poster with the video, with the website linked to the creative director of the agency. And then I sent that whole thing, and immediately after he called me and he was like, "Where are you now?" And at that time I was in the film festival for advertising in Cannes. And he was like, "Okay, I'll fly to Cannes tomorrow and we can talk." And he was like, flew to Cannes, we met up, and he was like, "I want to hire you full time as an art director in my company, and like, well, you can move to New York. I'll pay for the visa. You know, I'll sort all of that out." And I was like, you know,
Are you
20 years old. I was like, okay.
Can you imagine his reaction when he saw your application? He
Yeah.
was probably pretty stoked.
I guess, I don't know. Yeah. I guess, like you got to stand out somehow. Yeah. But yeah, so I moved to New York. I was like, huge ego and thinking like I can do everything. So it was very much like just big, bright eyes, trying to take things to the next level. Moved to New York, worked in advertising for a couple of years. Found out that in advertising, the client is kind of like your boss in the end. So they decide like what they think is creative and what they think should move on to the next steps and stuff. And I got a bit fed up with that. So I was like, if I have to do this, I have to do this on my own. So I quit, started my own agency.
In the US?
In the US,
Okay.
yeah. And
how many years had you been there before you did
that? In the US or at the agency?
In the US, before you started your own thing.
Yeah, well, I guess it was the same. So it was about 2 years. Yeah. And after that, I was like, okay, now I got to like do more of like what I actually like and what I'm passionate about. And that was more into the fashion industry. So I started getting more clients that were like fashion related and started doing invitations and like presentations and like creating like, communication for other fashion companies. So that was kind of like
Were you focused on like video, or did you do?
It was a lot of video in the beginning, because that's like, especially at that time, was an easy kind of like sell. But beyond that, it was also like invitations and like creative direction. There was like some website design even, and like just like a bunch of things about how to communicate the brand in other ways than just the clothes.
And like invitations to their events, like their shows and that kind of thing?
Exactly,
Okay.
yeah. Show invitations for like, just like, it was also like store design. It was packaging. It was like things that, like how can you tell the story of this brand beyond just the clothing?
And for somebody who's listening and don't really know how creative you can be with an invitation, I guess most people would think about that coming in an email.
Yeah.
But what are like ways of that you've seen of that?
It is sadly a lot like that now. But I think there is definitely sort of like a history of the fashion invitation of also being a thing. So I think a lot of companies have throughout created these like amazing invitations. There's like special ones that go into sort of like the history books of like invitations, especially like Margiela is like very famous for having created some really cool invitations. Also, in my opinion, Louis Vuitton through Virgil also had like some amazing invitations. I'm lucky enough to have a few of them myself. So rest in peace.
What were one of those like?
The one that I really think was like next level genius was a clock that had only Louis Vuitton logos as the time numerals, I guess, and it was going backwards. So the clock was going backwards, and
So you received a physical clock in your post.
an actual like wall clock.
wall clock.
Yeah, was there. Yeah, and I was just like, this guy is like beyond genius. Like it's so simple, like a clock that runs backwards, but it says so much about like the whole thing that he's trying to communicate, like just throwing people off by like a little bit makes the whole difference,
Okay, and then attached to the clock, there was somewhere information about the actual.
Of course. Yeah. You still got like a cardboard thing saying like you can meet here and here, you're sitting here and here, it's like those are still, like relevant, but it's sort of like giving people a bit of like an insight into what the show is about through the invitation. But at the same time, it's also like a collectible item from there. Balenciaga through Demna has also had some very memorable like invitations throughout time.
What was the connection between the clock and the show in this case, with the clock going backwards?
I think he was like trying to communicate sort of like this dream world. It was also a lot about like being there was like a lot of clouds, and it was like a big space that was all like meant to be like in the clouds. And it was sort of like a comment on like this has no time and place kind of thing. And also I think it's just like the idea that time reflected into something will sort of like translate in a different way. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. Like mumbling. Yeah.
No, but I think, I mean, I guess that you can like pull the parallel into what you're going to see at the show, and then what eventually the collection is going to be about. And,
Yeah. I think, I mean, both that, but also it's just like a little bit of like a teaser of creativity, like another output where you can do something that's like interesting for people to play around with.
Yeah.
Like it doesn't have to directly sort of like translate into the clothes. Some of them do, but there's also just some that are like, like this is another way of expressing some creativity.
And were you mainly working with fashion clients, or was that?
Yeah, it was mainly fashion clients at that time. There was also, I did some work for Adidas and for Nike and stuff. But it was mainly like fashion sort of like related clients. And then I started working for a brand called Hood by Air, which was at that time a very sort of like up and coming like a brand, very focused on like that, bringing that I don't want to say street culture because it has like the wrong associations, but bringing that into the high fashion scene. So I started working with them, doing like graphic design and like packaging and videos and like that sort of stuff.
So at this time when you're in New York, your brother is still in Copenhagen?
He's in Copenhagen, yeah. So he's studying business. So we were like still talking back and forth a lot and starting to sort of like formulate what a company or doing something together could look like. But we were still doing, like primarily doing different things than working on something.
Okay, so you were like kind of bouncing the idea off each other to like do something together or like do something else?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's always kind of like been in the cards, I guess, that we would do something together. We've been sort of like inseparable since we were very young. The first time we've ever been like, like separated for more than 2 weeks was when I moved to New York. So since we were like kids.
What's the age difference between?
3 years. Yeah. So it's not like we're like close, but we've always just had the same sort of like circle of friends. We've always had, like same interests and that kind of stuff. And we've always done things together, sort of like back to back. So I think that's, like it was kind of like, we cannot not do something together. It's like, so that it all makes sense to do something. And it just, like we were formulating and we were thinking, okay, fashion seems like an easy kind of like thing to do. I mean,
I
beautifully,
love that word. The key word there is easy.
Yeah. Very beautifully naive, thinking that, but we didn't know anything, so for us it was just like, okay, let's try it out and let's see, like I think, like thank God we were, didn't know everything that we were going into. We had to be like more focused on just thinking, okay, this is easy, and then you start digging, and then once you're in, like you can't stop kind of. Yeah.
It's too late to stop.
Exactly. Yeah.
But were you outside of your job and with clients in fashion, were you also like personally interested in like your free time as well from that age?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I was always like fascinated by communication and like telling things. So, and I think that one way you can do that is through clothes. And if that's like a personal expression that you can do through your own clothes, your own style, or if it's like as a brand that you can do that, tell a story through clothes, I think that's a beautiful medium that you can do it through. But I think with fashion, there's a special sort of like thing that it's not always just about the product. There's also sort of like a, like a whole world around it. Like you can't really say why Louis Vuitton is Louis Vuitton, but you kind of know that everything sort of like plays together and creates like a bigger thing, right?
And was this the case for your brother as well? Did he share the same interest in clothing?
I'm not sure if he was like particularly, like super interested in clothing. I think it was more for him, it was like the entrepreneurship of things. It was more like creating something and being sort of like in charge of something and creating a company and making things happen based on like something that you do yourself. I guess with his like interest in business and creating relationships with people and that kind of stuff, I think that was more the side that he was like interested in. And it also makes sense because that's how we sort of like split the whole business is like he's in charge of everything that relates to operations and business and all of that stuff, and I'm in charge of everything creative. So the shows, the clothes, the communication, everything like that.
When you and your brother are talking, can you take me through that process? Like when you're going from the idea to the first kind of like product that you're sure, like this is the one that we're going to produce. It feels like a very long step.
Oh yeah. I mean,
from that first idea until you have it in your hand.
There's a lot of steps that you go through. I think now it's more systematized than it was in the beginning because we didn't know anything about like how to sort of like take these steps. It was very much just like ad hoc, and like just thinking about things, trying to see if that can be created, and then taking things step by step, not knowing okay, like how do we manufacture this, what's it gonna cost, what are we gonna sell it at, like all of those things. So slowly, bit by bit, season by season, we're learning new things and applying those things that we've learned to the next one and the next one and the next one. And I think the way that we started is so different from like how, like things are created now. There's a lot more specifics that go into it now. So you have to sort of like look at all the numbers. You have to look at all the, like the things that are happening, developing in the company. You have to look at all your relationships with your manufacturers. You have to put everything together. There's, like just layers and layers and things. The sustainability aspect of things, like the combinations of how you're telling your story. Does that relate with what's actually making it possible for you to make a collection the next time, and all of those things. So there's a lot more that goes into it. It's like an equation that looks like very, very complicated and long. And sometimes there's things that are related more to like the creative aspect and things where it's like something that I really believe in and things that I want to push. And I say like, this is something that I think is cool and could be interesting to do. And Victor is really good at saying like, okay, I trust you. Let's do it. Even though it's not what, like what's showing that it's bringing in. And sometimes it's like, we got to do something in this direction because people really sort of like seeing this as a part of the collection, right? And sometimes it just takes more time to cement things with people. Like you're looking at like 2 years or something before people have actually sort of like adapted to your product. Whereas like the fashion cycle is more like, I mean, you say it's like 6 months, but really it's like you look at the idea, you kind of like get the first salesman sample, as you call it, and then you're already kind of like over it.
Really?
I mean, you feel
So it's
like,
more
okay,
like,
you did it, like, okay,
Yeah.
what's next kind of. But really in order to cement it with people, it's like that product then goes into the stores, it sells, oh, there's a success. Okay, they order more of it, and then it goes deeper and deeper, and then you maybe make like more variations of that one thing. You can see it like with all the big brands now, they have like a full range of something that started as like just one little simple idea.
You can get into fashion in a lot of different ways. And I mean, with Heliot Emil, is that how you pronounce it? Emil. Heliot
Yes.
Emil, yeah.
Heliot Emil.
I didn't know if it was Emil, because in Sweden you say Emil for
Yeah.
the name.
Yeah.
And you named this after your grandfather.
That's correct. Yeah.
If you get into fashion, you can do it in a lot of different ways. But you guys are really competing with the big brands. You're here at Paris Fashion Week. You have runway shows. Was that something you were thinking about like already from day one? Like that's the segment we're going to go into? Because you could also, there's so many other types of fashion brands that you could go into or be.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think it's like also kind of like come with obviously the advancements of social media. It's like now there's more than ever different ways that you can start all tons of businesses, right? But especially fashion has like really had a shift in sort of like how you create a successful fashion company. I guess for me, it was always like a huge dream to compete or some way be next to the greatest of all time, like the biggest brands. And I think that one way that you can do that is by coming here to Paris to be part of the official schedule of Paris Fashion Week. And that's always been like a huge dream for me to do something like that. But I don't necessarily think that that's the only way that you can sort of like get to the stage.
Yeah. But the high fashion world was something that like already from day one you were setting the goal on, I guess, because you had your first collection shown in Milan, was it?
Yeah, so we showed in Milan in spring summer 17, but that was in showroom. So we didn't show the collection as like a runway show there. We started doing our runways in Copenhagen, where we're from. So we did the first couple ones there, and after a very short time, it was like there was 300 people outside of our show wanting to get in, and being kind of like restless as I am, I was like, okay, that was it. Like we've done it. We've reached the top here. What can we do next? Like how can we, like get it to that next level? And then bam, COVID happened. Everyone's like, no physical shows ever again. Kind of.
Yeah. That was like the feeling. Yeah.
It was kind of like everyone was like, okay, the world is over.
It felt like everybody was like reevaluating what normal world was like. Like, are we ever gonna fly for a meeting again? People were
Exactly.
asking.
Yeah. It was like, well, is the airline business actually dead?
Yeah.
I was like, I doubt it. So that happened and we couldn't do shows, but we luckily enough, actually right before COVID, we did our first digital show because we thought that was a way that we could sort of like reach more people. So we created this actually a really cool idea, a site with 7 different angles of a show so that people coming into the site, they could pick the angle that they wanted to see the show from. So if you wanted to see it more close up, if you're really into details, like if you're into the makeup or whatever, then you can see it really close up. If you want to see it from like the far away, then there was an angle for that. So that's something that we did.
You did that like way before the digital show was like a widespread thing because of COVID.
Exactly. We did that in 2019 as like a step into taking things to the next level kind of and trying to release it to everyone. So it wasn't just like focused on the few people that come to Copenhagen Fashion Week, because we knew that we were already sort of like more a global brand or like trying to reach a global audience more than we were trying to like impress the people in Copenhagen. So we wanted to like make something where people could be involved from everywhere, like if you're in Fiji or Nigeria or whatever, you can have the same experience of the show. And it was extremely successful. And we were like blown away by the response. Like actually we did a pre-order on the site and it ended up covering all of the expenses that we had for that show, which is like,
wow.
Like it was like mind blowing to us.
And this was already in like year 3 then?
Yeah, it was like, year 2, 3, of everything. So that was like a bit like, wow, this could actually be something, Oh. We actually had the operation of LVMH reach out to us and ask us how we do digital shows.
Really?
Because apparently we've become like the experts on by doing like one show.
And you were doing it before it was cool.
Yeah, exactly. And they were like, could you do something like this for Dior? And I'm like, yeah, I guess. Yeah, so that was quite like, like, wow, maybe look at what we're doing. And I think it's always been important to me to do things that are innovative and interesting, because that's how you can sort of like stay ahead of the curve, because we know that we're never going to be able to compete with, let's say, the product of what Louis Vuitton is coming out with, because we just don't have that sort of like craftsmanship and like that level of engagement with the clothes is like, just we can't compete there. But what we can compete on is like the creativity, because that's something that like is kind of free for people to come up with like cool ideas that can be possible, and that was one way to kind of like try and be innovative and do new things.
And the style of the clothes, like monochromatic, is that how you say it? Was that like a style clothes that you felt yourselves were missing that you wanted to wear, or how did that design come about?
I guess like being from Copenhagen, it's very much like pastel colors and like free and flowy and flowers and everything, especially for the girls. And I think the guys is a little bit more just like minimalistic and like very simple and straight cuts.
Like the furniture from from Denmark?
Pretty much, yeah. I mean, I think that's also, I guess, where the appreciation, fascination comes from, with like having something that's that clean and simple in the expression. But I think it comes from like a personal fascination of sort of like the beauty in industrial elements for me. I've always been, like very into what does the machine look like underneath the hood, like not trying to cover things up, but like really showing what the bits and bolts and that kind of stuff looks like. So I guess that's where like the fascination of showing a bit more of like this rawness and like this realness comes from.
Okay, yeah. So rather a transparent hood over the engine than covering it with something else.
Exactly. Yeah.
I think you really get that feeling, and it's like to me, it feels like a mix of this monochromatic with the industrial, as you're saying, but it's also like minimalistic. It's a lot of metal mixed with black. For me, looking from the outside, it feels like a very in its own thing.
Well, thank you so much. I mean, it's there will always be others that have that same sort of like expression. It's the same thing in like film and art and these kind of things. It's like everything is a remix. Like nothing we can do is so brand new that it doesn't relate to anything that we've done before. But there are different combinations that you can do, like that's why it's also interesting to, like be a chef or something like that, right? Because yes, you have the culinary world to work with. Like we can only eat these things out of the earth, but you can combine them and push them in different ways that will create another experience. So I think that, like it's the same thing with us. There are like definitely people that are in the same space and in the same category, but I think we're kind of like all unique in our own ways.
There's this famous saying, I think it's Henry Ford, who said that if he would be asking people what they would have wanted, they would have said faster horses. But then he invented the T Ford. And you guys are competing on innovation, like coming up with a lot of new things. How do you think about analyzing the macro and what's happening out there and taking your inspiration from there versus like from the inside?
That's a great question, actually, because it's sort of like if you look at what people want, then, like they already know that they want it. So in a way, they kind of like don't want it, does that make sense?
Yeah,
like,
I think so.
Like you can't really describe what it is that you want until you see something where you're like, wow, I didn't even know that I wanted that, but like now I want it like even more.
Yeah.
So I think it's always super important to stay true to yourself and to not be too influenced by like what people are saying they want more of. You know, like obviously you gotta like not always like try to like provoke people to you know, like want something different. You got to stay sort of like within the same space, but always give them something new that they didn't really think to want, if that makes sense. Like, because the grasp of like what people will say that they want is within their own sort of like understanding of what it could be. But if your understanding of what it could be is greater than that, then you can give them an even like greater experience. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Like it's the same thing, I guess, like now also again with music or like the culinary world or something like that. If you just tell like, oh, I want a song that's like this, but like louder or more like that, then once it comes out, you're not really like really you know, like mind blown by it. But if you get something where you're like, I didn't know how to kind of like react to it, then you know, like you're like even more fascinated by it. But it's a great question.
And fashion is culture, right? So that's why you have artists in you know, a week like this in Paris, and you have DJs and people from music and so on. Do you like look into other worlds than fashion for inspiration for the design as well? Because, you know, speaking from my own experience, finding like a creative process is really hard, especially when you're doing it in your job and coming up with things. But I'm really fascinated about like, how do the ideas generate?
No, that's a great question. And also, I mean, it's very true what you're saying, that fashion is sort of like a reflection of the contemporary era that we're in, right? It's kind of like showing the world through an art medium what's happening right now, right? And I think because the output is so fast, like it really translates very quickly to what's happening. So if there are like geopolitical things that are happening in the world, then they're very quickly reflected in fashion. There has been numerous geopolitical incidents as well that has changed sort of like the framework of what we look at as like fascinating within the industry. So I think that fashion has a great, you know, like medium as well. But again, it's shared with something that is, you know, like a space where it's also something that covers a need, you know, like you have to actually be able to wear the jacket and it has to be kind of warm, you know, so you're like dealing in this like middle space where it's like people are comparing, you know, couture with fast fashion, right? You're kind of like in the same space, even though you're absolutely not, you know, like it's kind of like comparing some of the greatest artists to a poster company or something like that, right? And by then people will know, oh, I know that this poster will never go into the museum, but they don't really know the same thing about fashion, like that haute couture dress is not actually meant to be worn, you know, like it's a reflection of like the designer's creativity, you know, and that's something that people, especially on social media, have a hard time kind of like sometimes you know, like seeing, because they will comment like, oh, how are you ever gonna wear that? It has like only one sleeve, or you know, it's like it's like, no, that's not the point. So it's interesting. But I think it's important that, you know, like that the creators, they stand up and that they speak as much as possible and help things push it into the right direction. I think there's a lot of interesting things happening within sustainability and within pushing things to the next level within this industry that hopefully can also be reflected reflected and can be seen through other industries then, like let's say hypothetically the fashion industry came up with a way of doing a certain material that is very, very sustainable. And then they start using that in the sports industry. And then the sports industry is then, reflected then into another industry and so on, uniforms or whatever. And then you started something in the fashion industry that then is reflected through other industries that also look at these innovations. And I think that that's important, that fashion continues to be that leading star within that medium.
I think you really hit some very interesting points there, and like one of them I think is, speaking of the runway shows, like what people are seeing on these shows, and then they're thinking about clothes, like how you're wearing them. What is it that the designer wants to say, and what's the business rationale behind, a fashion show like that, where you're having models wearing clothes that people probably won't wear on the street?
Yeah.
What's the thinking? I think a lot of people don't understand how that works.
Absolutely. I think you're not the only person asking that question. I think there's a lot of people, especially also within the companies, like, yo, this is not making sense for the business. Like, it's very expensive and we're not seeing any increase in sales. So I think you're not the only person asking that question, because obviously now we have so many ways of communication and that are extremely measurable. So you can literally see with like ads on social media, like what is the return on investment here, like as a number, and you can't really see that with a fashion show. You can't see the exact sort of like what is the number that came from this thing. But I think one thing that's really sort of like dominant is that the thing that you can create where the sum is greater than its parts, that's when you have created something that goes that extra mile, that translates that much better. You don't really show necessarily the product, but you're showing off a part of the universe. And I think that's also why, like big brands, they sponsor athletes. Like, it's not like once you drink a Red Bull, you're going to be able to jump out of a spacecraft, and like spin down like Felix Baumgartner. But doing that reflects that this is the type of stuff that Red Bull does. Like, it's not like you're exactly going to be wearing that piece from the runway, but wearing the t-shirt makes you a supporter or part of the idea that you respect the world that they are creating, the brand.
When visiting a new country or city, I find that food is at the heart of almost all cultures. But finding the real gems can usually be a challenge, and it can be hard to know where to go for recommendations. A new benefit as an American Express Platinum member is their dining experience, and it's one with a lot of value if you like trying new restaurants like me. I'm a member in Sweden, which gets you a 2-course dinner for 2 people 3 times per year at selected restaurants. And what I especially like is that it also gives me recommendations to try out new curated restaurants. And also when traveling, you get your money back on the restaurant bill up to a certain level per year. So if you want to read more about how the dining experience works, check out the Platinum card in the description or on the American Express website. And specific dining terms and conditions apply.
So the universe that the brand is creating, like a part of that universe is what you're saying.
Exactly, yeah.
And it must be incredibly hard, because at a fashion week, for instance, you have a lot of shows and it gets a lot of attention. And I mean, brands continue to do it year after year, several times a year. And so I guess it makes a lot of sense, but it's a very fascinating thing that, I don't really see it in other industries either. Like where you have like this concentration around like certain times of
No,
year,
that's true.
and then it gets shown to so many people.
Yeah.
But it's also hard to measure. So I guess it's a lot of feeling in it.
Yeah.
To see what, like, how to make the decisions on whether to do it and how to do it.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, obviously there are things that you can measure, and there are also sort of like, you know, it's kind of like impressing your partners as well. Like the people that you're inviting to your shows, they are the buyers. They're the magazines that will be making articles about you throughout the year. They will, the buyers will be buying the collection, and you're trying to also translate and impress them in certain ways. And you can do that through a show. You can collect everyone at one point and then say like, this is like to show you guys what we're doing right now. And obviously you don't want to just show them like the hoodie and the t-shirt, you know, even though they might know that that's what's going to sell in their stores. But you want to show them, okay, this is what the next level looks like. So I think it's like, you know, like it's a bit of a mix of everything. It's like showing your peers what's going on. It's like showing your community what's happening. It's like it's a vibe. It's a, you know, like it's fun. It's cool. So it's not like, you know, you're always looking for like, why are we doing this? Why, you know, like sometimes it's also just like, you know, it's fun and it's like, it's cool. And you want to be able to do fun and cool stuff through your work. And that's how you sort of like get to that next level, you know?
So it feels really like that you and your brother found a world to be in, which is a very good match with who you are as personalities as well. Like, I mean, sometimes you can see people who are working with something that is just very remote from who they are in real life. I've worked at jobs like, you know, in the past that where like I'm not feeling like a big overlap really between who I am and this job, but I have a feeling like for you guys it's a very like your personal life and the business life is kind of
absolutely. I mean, the lines between business and pleasure are definitely blurred. And I think that's amazing and that's beautiful for us that, you know, like we can go out with our partners to dinners and stuff, and that's something that we actually like to do. You know, like we like to be around people. We like to talk and you know, like talk about all the things that are happening, and while that is also part of, you know, the strategic business sort of like relationship building, but it's also just like part of like who we are. And I think that's important, that whatever you do in life, you gotta stay true to what you can actually enjoy, because that's when it really becomes fascinating. When you're sitting at 2 a.m. and you didn't even realize that it was 2 a.m., but you're just so damn passionate about this thing that you cannot let it go and you cannot not do it, you know? So I think that's like what the perfect sort of like ideal scenario looks like for me, at least.
So this is like something that you would have done in your free time, even maybe if you would be working at another job.
Yeah, if I had that much free time. Yeah.
Exactly.
No, most definitely. Yeah.
How have you guys financed this over the years? I guess it's pretty costly. Well, now it's been up and running, but have you bootstrapped this from the beginning, or have you taken in external investments?
We've never taken in anything, and a lot of people think that, you know, like we come from this super wealthy background or something like that. You know, they're just these like guys from blah blah blah, and that's absolutely not true at all. We like did not get a salary for the first like 2-3 years, you know, and for us, it's never been about the money. Like it's never been even like a motivating factor. So We started the brand with 3,000 euros. We took what we made from that collection, we put it into the next collection. We made some money from that collection. We took that, we put it into the next collection, and then literally just step by step build it day by day. And it's still like that to this day. We're taking what we made from the previous collection. We're seeing how do we invest this money the best to grow the business. And we've never taken in any external cash. We don't have any debt, and we've been like positive from day one. So I think we're very, very fortunate, and we're sort of like lucky enough that we were able to sort of like live cost efficiently for some time, that this was possible. But it's never been about the money for us. So I think that that's also very important for us, that it also never becomes about the money, because that's when you compromise, I think.
And so not taking a salary for those first 2 or 3 years, I guess that's kind of like a sacrifice in a way, when you're seeing what other people who are your friends, and they're getting a certain stream of income that you don't have during those years. Like, was that something that, you know, was hard, or was it like it was just a part of it? How did you think about that?
I mean, Copenhagen is actually kind of like, in a way, beautiful like that you don't really pay a lot of value to people who have a ton of money. I mean, the lawyer can be best friends with the trash man, you know. It's like there's not really that sort of like separation in wealth. So I think that there's not that focus on it, so you don't really even speak to your friends about it. Or like, if your friends are saying like, oh, I'm a bit, you know, like strapped on cash, you're like, okay, that's fine, you know, like, I'll get this one, you get the next one. You know, it's not like that you feel like, oh, I can't hang out with these people because they don't have the same lifestyle as me, or things like that. So I think that
sounds like a great vibe.
It is really, really nice.
Should be
and
more places in the world.
Yeah, I mean, especially going to New York and seeing how extreme the separation is between the people and the wealth there, it kind of like made me realize, you know, like I didn't know what I had in Copenhagen. And yeah, I think also just like, you know, like going out to clubs and stuff, there's like not a separation. Like everyone is on the dance floor. It's like, it doesn't matter if you're like a high roller model, whatever, it's a blah, blah, blah. You're still on the, you know, the same floor as everyone else. And going to New York, it's literally like steps and, you know, like, oh, you're not allowed on step 3 because you don't have this.
Because there's a private equity company owning this club.
Exactly. Yeah. So I think that, with that, we never, you know, like it was never super present that we weren't taking out anything for ourselves. And I was lucky enough to have some money saved up because I, like we talked about, did a bunch of video and design for like other companies. So I was still doing that on the side and getting some income from that, so that I could sort of like maintain just like a normal lifestyle, and was able to also do the whole project and the brand on the side.
So Heliot Emil, it's received a lot of praise, and it caught the attention of a lot of like big names in culture and in fashion and so on. What do you think it is about the brand that like catches the attention of, you know, some of the biggest names in culture when it's a very competitive space?
That's a good question. Like, if I knew that exactly, I think it would be very easy to replicate again and again and again. But I honestly like don't really know what it is that people find fascinating, and that people sort of like reflect with, or, you know, like they see themselves in. I think it's just possibly the authenticity and the fact that, you know, like we're quite streamlined in what we're doing, and we're staying in our own space, in our own lane, and we're not really like catering to these people. And I think it's the same thing with celebrities, as we were talking about before, that if they kind of like already know what they want, they kind of like don't want it. But if they see something where it's like, oh, you know, like I didn't know that I wanted this, and then it starts to become fascinating. And I mean, we never share anything with like the celebrities that are wearing the clothes. Like, yeah, like all the big name celebrities have worn the clothes, but we've never sort of posted it on our feed on Instagram or something like that. I think for us, it's important that it becomes more than what they are saying is cool. You know, like we need to say that we think that this is cool. It's very cool that you sort of like feel the same way, but we don't want to say that other people should buy it because you think it's cool. You know, like we want to say that we think it's cool. It's I'm happy that you think so too, but it's equally as valued that other people also think it's cool. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense, because as opposed to, as you're saying, you could be reposting a lot of things, and then it's almost like kind of as if you're following them in a way, I guess.
Exactly.
Whereas this, like you're going this direction. If people like it, it's great.
Yeah.
But it doesn't really matter who likes it.
No, I mean, obviously we're super humbled by, you know, like these people that can literally get anything they want. They can just like point and say like, I want that, but done like this, but in a different color with these things. And the fact that they want to wear our clothes is like extremely humbling. And like, wow, that's I appreciate that so much. And at the same time, I'm saying like, I'm so happy that you feel that way. But I don't want to like compromise what I'm doing just to please you. I equally want to please the person behind you, because I think that that's also, you know, like equally as valuable, that other people, you know, like when I see people on the street wearing the clothes, I'm like, wow, you actually supported the brand, like, and they might not even know, you know, like, and I still get to this day like super humbled by that.
How do you design your own life? Like, I guess you work insane hours. Do you just turn it off certain weeks of the year? Do you not work weekends? Like, or what is it like?
It used to be very stressful and like very hectic and like very long hours and like a lot of work. But more and more so, I think I've run into this, you know, like concept that all of these things that are happening, you can actually execute that like much faster and then spend the rest of the time sort of like reloading and appreciating and like doing all the things that you were meant to be doing, because there's always more that you could do. There's always more that you can push. And if you're pushing every day until 11, then you get so burned out that the stuff that you're coming up with in this time is not as good as if you're like taking the time to recharge and really, you know, like value that what you're doing now is like important. Does that make sense? So you're not just like wasting your time being like constantly working on things, but really taking the time to reflect on, okay, what is it that I should be working on that's going to like really help this to the next level. Then I do a lot of sport. I do a lot of running and workout and stuff, and try to stay as healthy as possible, because I think that's also equally as possible. None of this would be possible if you didn't have a good health. So that's also a very important part of your life.
Was that something you realized like a few years in? Like that, like, wow, okay, I need to actually think about this too.
Yeah, I mean, I've always been very competitive and like with my life always been doing sports. So it's a natural sort of like thing for me. But now it's like I literally get anxious if I don't work out during like a day. And I had this like challenge where I went for like 500 days in a row and like doing sport every day.
How many days?
500.
500 days.
I actually made it, I think, to like 550 or something before I had like one day where I was like, oh, I didn't do anything today. So yeah, I mean, and it could just be like things like a run or, like even like a bike ride or something like that, or going to the gym or doing yoga or something like that. But just like doing one active thing every day.
Breaking some sweat.
Exactly. Yeah.
I wanted to also touch on, like, I think it's very fascinating with planning a fashion show because, I mean, setting up an interview here has been stressful. And I think I'm doing 4 or 5 interviews this week. And I mean, that's not even remotely close in an astronomical perspective to what you guys are doing. But like, it's the real world, tangible stuff. It's people you're dealing with, spaces you're booking. It's last minute changes. I mean, there's so many things. Even my stress level this week has been off the charts. So can you like visualize for me what, maybe now you've gotten into the process, but I guess like now it's, given that you didn't have sleep that much this last week, but planning a fashion show, like, how would you describe it?
Intense. Yeah. I mean, I'm very much, I have an organized mindset, like I love solving problems.
But you're the creative guy.
Yeah. But like, I love, like having things down to a way of executing, like a standard operating procedure. So what to start with, and then from there things can sort of like fall into its place. So given that this is the 3rd time we did it, we always do these like debriefs after each show, and we say, okay, what can we take from the show? What can we see what we've learned and then apply to the next one? And we did that the first time to the second one, and from the second one we did it to the third one, this one as well.
And the first one you had a year back at the spring, and
yeah, exactly, in at Palais de Tokyo. That was like our first. We took what we could from that, and then sort of like strategized how can we plan this as efficiently as possible. So everything that we could do leading up to the show, we did prior to that. I mean, and thankfully we have an amazing team that really puts their all into making these things happen. So they were extremely efficient and extremely organized. Like literally every partner that we have has complimented us on like our structure and efficiency. And like I can see like the lights in Victor's eyes. It's like they're like complimenting how organized and clean everything is rolling, because we are a small team compared to like some of the clients that they're working with, and they're saying like we're way more organized than some of those guys, and Victor's just like, oh, thank you. So I mean, and equally as much me, because it's also, like a big part of it is also trying to sort out all the things that can go wrong, so that the things that really matter are the ones that stress you in a way, if that makes sense.
Things that really okay.
Yeah, like like if there are things that you get thrown a curveball, then you have enough sort of like space in your head to focus on that thing, because you did what you could in planning every other step. So like when we like when we're preparing, we do all the styling, all the style cards, all the looks back in Copenhagen. We do all the photography, all the close-ups, all the details. How's it going to be dressed? We put that on boards. We pack it into individual boxes with the pictures of the fits. Everything is like clean and organized. Everything goes on one truck that's being sent to Paris. The whole team goes here. Everything's like neatly organized and planned with schedules for every day. What do we need to execute? How do we need to do this? Everyone has packing lists and everything. So there's a lot of organizing that goes into it, and thankfully we have an amazing team that executes on that.
Wow. How big is the team?
So full-time now we are 14 people, and with freelancers and interns and everything, I think we're 22, 23. Yeah. And growing a lot this year, hiring new people, trying to sort of like organize things into departments, so there's not too much of like an overlap between people, and they can stay focused on one thing instead of like having to do like 3 things at once, kind of. Yeah.
And you did one show in the fall, and now it's 6 months later, you're doing another one. Is this a thing that involves almost everybody in the company?
Yeah, somewhat. Almost. I mean, obviously, the design team is way more involved in everything. The whole creative team is more involved in the creative outputs, but the business team also has, like their role in terms of like making sure that all the operations, the logistics of everything is run super smoothly. All of the buyers are notified, like all the sales are happening, like all of that stuff. So it's definitely a joint effort, but with emphasis on the design team to doing the heavy lifting.
For a brand like Heliot Emil, what is a fashion week, and what does that look like for you? You have the show. Is it also like meetings with buyers and these kind of, or what do you do during a fashion week?
Yeah, so the show is like actually just like one part of it. It's you have men's fashion week and women's fashion week, and then you have autumn, winter, and spring, summer. And then during these, there are also the sell-ins. So the sell-in periods, the showrooms. And here you have the main collection and the pre-collection. And then besides that, once a year, there's the haute couture. So that's not something that we're part of, but that's also just like a fashion week. It's a bit complicated. But so you have a showroom where you sell to your buyers, and you can have like some appointments with PR, press, maybe some, like celebrities or something can come there, but primarily it's for the buyers to see the collection and to put in their orders for the next season. And then you have the show as like an event or a happening. And then other than that, you also spend a lot of this time meeting with new potential partners, meeting with like all the people from the industry, and kind of like making things happen. And then there's obviously also other events that you're going to, things where you're, like showing your presence. And then we have another event that we're doing. We're doing a collaboration with a Japanese coffee brand, and we're having like a release of a bunch of coffee objects in their store, all stainless steel, like a whole range of like milk jugs and coffee cups and spoons and like all of that stuff. Yeah. So
in their store,
so they're going to be releasing it. We're going to serve espresso martinis and black cookies and like everything black, and listen to some good music and have some good vibes.
And that's here
in Paris. Okay. Yeah. So we actually have one that's in the evening because they have 2 stores here. So one that's in the evening in one of their stores, and then one that's brunch the next day in their other store. So, and it's just meant to kind of like show the community that we're doing different things, and like that this is also part of like the aesthetic and the direction that we like.
And you don't have any own stores now, right?
No, we're working on we're doing our own store this year in Copenhagen. So
you're launching your own first store.
That's gonna be our first store, yeah. And then after that, the plan is to open in Korea and in Paris here. So that's gonna be next year. So the Copenhagen one is gonna be like our flagship store, and hopefully be like a good beta version for what we need to think about when we open a store in a place like Paris.
Have you ever thought about the option of moving the whole company to like a major fashion hub like Paris, or Milan or New York or anything like that? Or,
Definitely. Yeah. The plan is to move at least some parts of it to Paris here, to be more present, because even though we are very organized and systemized and everything, it's just not the same as like being here physically and being able to sort of like, like translate exactly the things that you're doing, and also just like working with the talent that's here is like way like you have way more opportunities than what you would have in a place like Copenhagen. So it's definitely part of the plan to move some of like the design studio, or at least some parts of the year, move that design studio to Paris and work on the collections for the shows here.
Wow. And you were talking about the Heliot Emil universe before. So like lastly, I wanted to dive into like what do you see the Heliot Emil universe become over the next few years?
If you said over the next few weeks, then maybe I would have like a better answer. I can pull up my calendar.
Yeah. If you're dreaming.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, honestly, I just want to continue, like the amazing journey that we're on right now. I'm like extremely humbled and like fortunate to be doing something that I love. So if I can continue to do something like that, then, like my day is made, like I can't ask for more. And I hope that, like that's going to continue. And being super restless as I am, it's obviously not just going to stop with what we're doing now. I think we're going to continue to expand the universe. We're going to do more interesting things. We're working on collaborations in the gastronomy world. We're working on, like big collaborations with industries that are outside of fashion as well. And that's something that's interesting to me, is like, how can we broaden this universe? How can we make it more than it is now? And with that, also the category expansion, like what more can we do? How can we make things cool in other categories than we're working on now? So hopefully 3 years from now, that's what it's going to look like, with 2 beautiful stores, or 3 or 5.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. And it feels like you also have like there's also a connection with a lot of these things already, like with a collab with the Japanese coffee brand. And in Copenhagen, you have a lot of like furniture inspiration, I guess, as well. So I guess it's not a short step, obviously, but it's somewhere in the same realm, at least.
Yeah, definitely. It's like a natural progression, hopefully. And that's also what is important to me, is also that it feels natural, that we're not like, like going in a completely different direction, but that we're adding on to the universe and like giving people more ways to connect with the brand and to represent and to show the universe. So I think that's what I'm hoping to do, is just like to connect with people on as many levels as possible.
And lastly, what's a restaurant one should not miss when in Copenhagen?
I mean, honestly, I would say Alchemist is like renowned for their extreme experience. So I think, if possible, if you could get a reservation there, I think that would be the one to go to.
Is that as like crazy as the reservations for like some of these other? Like,
I think it's the
you have to be there, like, okay,
in the world right now. The wait list, I think it's like 9 months wait list or something. I'm not sure, but and it's not cheap either. But apparently it's like, the one experience in the world that is nothing like it. I mean, they literally they have a full dome screen in the ceiling that reflects what you're eating, like visually as well. So like there's just so many layers to this place. It's like, it's insane. And they have like hired a visuals guy on the team that literally just works on visuals. Like a restaurant has this. Yeah, so that place is beyond like imagination.
Okay.
yeah. So I think if you can, that's one. And then I guess the second one would be one of my favorite places called Mündergel. It's a restaurant that does open face sandwiches, the smørrebrød, and it's just very, very nicely executed. It's very Danish. So if you're trying to get something Danish, then I would go to that one.
Like the genuine Danish experience?
Yeah, somewhat genuine.
It's not
you know,
everybody
like,
in Denmark who has a visual team when they're
exactly. Yeah. I mean, it's genuine in the way that, you know, like the traditional Danish recipes, but it's like refined and like made perfectly. So I think that's one of the ones that I would recommend for sure.
That's a great recommendation.
Yeah.
Julius, thank you so much.
Gustav,
thanks so much for doing this crazy week.
Oh, thank you for having me.
It's been really inspiring, really, really interesting conversation. And what are you up to next?
Now we are meeting with a partner, a collaborator that we're going to work with for next season. I can't say who yet because we haven't signed the contract. Yeah. So, but it's going to be big. It's going to be very, very cool and very interesting. So that's what I'm doing now. And then tomorrow we have the coffee event. So we're planning and doing all of that. That's what's next.